I was a Navy SEAL, Buds Class 237, and assigned to SEAL Team 10. I enlisted in the Navy after dropping out of college. I realized it just wasn't for me. Going to college, getting my degree, and working for some 9-to-5 job for the rest of my life. I felt like I was meant for something more. My parents weren't happy when I told them I had quit college and planned on becoming a Navy SEAL. Looking back on it, I probably should have pushed through my last 2 years of college so I could have at least had a degree to fall back on in case anything doesn't work out. I made it through training, and let me tell you, that was one of the hardest things I have ever done, and eventually earned my SEAL Trident. I remember the day like it was yesterday. "Seaman Dakota Waters, please step forward," said my SQT instructor. He smiled, pinned on my trident, and we saluted each other. And that was that. I was officially a Navy SEAL. Everyone clapped, including my parents who were there, and had grown to accept my decision. The moment was surreal. So much hard work finally paying off. Within a month, I was shipped out to Afghanistan for my first tour. After my first tour, I found a girlfriend, Mary, who I eventually married. During my second tour, I was notified we had a little girl on the way. After 3 tours to all around the Middle East, I had eventually worked my way up to Chief Petty Officer. The guys on my squad, they were my brothers. I had spent more time with them than I did with my own family, and we had been through hell together. One day, about 4 months after coming home from Iraq after our third tour, me and some buddies from the team were kicking back by a bonfire at a ranch one of my buddies owned. We were having a good time drinking beers, telling stories, laughing, and reminiscing. It was at that moment when I received a phone call. It was our commanding officer. I thought this was odd because our commanding officer, LT Shipley, never calls us unless it's extremely urgent. I told everyone to quiet down, and I put it on speaker. "Chief Petty Officer Waters, are you alone?" said Shipley on the other end of the line. No, I'm with my squad." "Why?" I replied. "Good, they need to hear this too," he replied. "In 1 week, you and your squad will be shipping out to Panama to conduct reconnaissance on illegal trade routes leading up through Central America and into the US. We all looked at each other, somewhat in shock. We had all just gotten back from deployment not 4 months ago, and now they are shipping us off to Panama. One of my teammates, Daniel, spoke up and said, "That can't be right. There are no known drug trafficking routes in southern Central America. They all start in Costa Rica. Maybe they've found new ones and they want us to gather more information on them," my buddy Ricky said, sounding incredulous. "Regardless of what exactly they want us to be looking at, it's complete bullshit. We already getting deployed again," I complained. We all thought the whole situation was very weird, but eventually we just accepted it. Just as stated, exactly a week from that day, we were on a plane being shipped out to Panama. Panama is a trashy place, no offense to anyone from there, but after what happened to me, I do not regret talking about bad things about that place. It's awful. The second we landed at the headquarters in the middle of the fucking jungle, where we would be living for the next 2 months, I knew I was gonna hate it. Humid, sticky, warm, bugs constantly buzzing around in your ears. It's enough to make a bunch of hardened warriors go mad. We got to our bunks, unpacked our stuff, and relaxed. We knew it was going to be long 2 months, so we needed all of the sleep we can get. "Wonder what exactly they're gonna have us spying on tomorrow?" asked Johnson, our team's medic. "No idea," Ricky replied. That's the last thing I remember before drifting off into sleep. I was awoken in the next morning to LT Shipley banging on the side of my bunk. "Everyone up! Time to go, everyone up, come on!" I checked on the clock on the wall above my bed. 3:42 in the morning. I rubbed my eyes, shook my head, and sat up. This damn early LT, I said irritatingly. I don't make the rules, I just enforce them, he replied. Everybody up, let's go. Once everyone was up, we grabbed a quick snack to give us energy and then headed to the briefing room to figure out what we were going to be doing. The briefing room was small. You could fit maybe 10 people at most in there. We were greeted by some army general whose name I didn't know. He shook our hands and sat all four of us, myself, Ricky, Daniel and Johnson down. Alright boys, your mission is to gather as much information as you can on this tunnel we discovered about 80 clicks southeast from this point. We suspect it to be used by drug traffickers to smuggle contraband just as heroin and cocaine across the border into Mexico, so the cartels can ship it to America. There is a clearing with a perfect view of the entrance to the tunnel about 600 yards where you all can remain hidden. Overall, the objective is fairly simple. Watch the entrance of the tunnel, photograph what you see, make reports and report back of anyone entering or exiting the tunnel. Got it? We all replied with yes sir. Exville will be 20 clicks over this mountain at approximately 9 p.m. So don't miss it, Shipley added. It was at that moment I realized that Shipley was in full combat gear. I don't know how I hadn't noticed it before. Are you going on this operation with us, Shipley? I asked. Oh no, I got my own operation with another squad, he said. I thought that was a little weird. I thought this entire situation was weird. Ever since we had arrived, things hadn't seemed right. I asked my squad if they felt the same way and they said they did. Johnson said he had been getting weird looks from all the higher-ranking personnel since he had gotten there. He told me he even saw 2 Air Force women pointing at him and whispering something in each other's ears. I didn't know what to make out of the situation, but what could I do? My job was to execute what the higher-ups told me to do. We were to load up on the helicopter in 5 minutes. All right, boys, I said, let's load out. We collected our gears, weapons and everything else we would need for this operation. The helicopter ride there was rather uneventful. 20 minutes of flying over a thick jungle until eventually we saw it. You could barely see it due to being early morning and still being dark, but it was there. It was bigger than any tunnel I had ever seen. The opening of it stood at least 90 feet tall and looked like it had been there for centuries. The helicopter flew us right past it, about half a mile away from it, until it dropped us off. The reason we got dropped off so far away from the objective is in case anyone of the interest is at the location at that current moment, they will not see us. Once we were dropped off, it was a good walk to get where we were going to settle up in. Once we got there, we unpacked everything we had. Johnson had his pair of binoculars. Ricky had a zoomed-in scope he attached to his long-range rifle. Daniel had a camera and notepad, and I was on communication duty, or comms as we like to call it. The first 5 hours were uneventful, sitting there with our perfect view of the entrance to the tunnel. Nothing happened, no one entered, no one left it. It was around 10:30 at this point and the sun was up now. It was around this time when I told Ricky, Daniel and Johnson that we should take sleeping schedules. 2 of us keep watch while the other 2 sleep, and we could switch every 3 hours. We were to wake the 2 sleepers up if anything eventful happened. Daniel and Johnson offered to take first watch while Ricky and I slept. I was fine with that idea. The Lord knew I needed some shut-eye. I rolled out my backpack for a pillow and slowly drifted off to sleep. Dakota, wake up. I was awoken to Johnson shaking me and yelling in my face. What's going on? I asked. I then looked around and noticed Daniel was missing. Where the hell did Daniel go? I asked. The tunnel. He walked into the tunnel. What do you mean he walked into the tunnel? Asked Ricky, who was awake at this point. It was about an hour after you 2 had gone to sleep he had been completely normal. But then he just got up and started walking towards the entrance. I tried to stop him, but he just kept walking. It was almost as if he was in some kind of trance, Johnson replied. We gotta go after him, I said. We were given in strict orders not to enter the tunnel, Johnson replied hesitantly. That's our damn brother in there, let's go, Ricky said, grabbing his rifle and running towards the tunnel. Me and Johnson both grabbed our rifles and followed Ricky. As we got closer and closer to the tunnel, I began to make out more distinct features of it. It had stalagmites and stalactites, and it didn't go straight through the mountain. It went down into it. This wasn't a tunnel. This was a cave. Wait, I said. Look at this. I don't know any drug traffickers that would use this to smuggle cocaine. Ricky and Johnson both looked as baffled as I was. What do we do? Asked Ricky. We can't leave Daniel down there, I said. Hope you guys like spelunking. We turned on the flashlights to our rifles and began our descent into the cave. The first few 100 feet had nothing in them, just dark tunnels. But about 500 feet in, we began noticing drawings on the walls. At first, they were just normal caveman drawings, pictures of tigers and leopards from thousands of years ago. But as the drawings went on, they got more confusing. The leopards and tigers were soon replaced by violent scribbles, as if someone had gotten a piece of chalk and scrubbed the walls with it as hard and spastically as they could. We kept following the scribbles along the wall until they eventually stopped. What was drawn after the scribbles, I still have not forgotten to this day. A picture of a person. But it wasn't a person. It had long, disgusting tentacles and dragon-like wings. It had horns on its head with long lizard-like tail. But it wasn't so much the drawing of the creature that scared me. It was the drawings of the hundreds of people around it, bowing to it, worshipping it. The pictures then went on to show people giving human sacrifices to this creature. There were drawings of babies being burnt alive and the burnt corpse being fed to it. It was disgusting. What the fuck? Said Ricky. Maybe it's a drawing of deity thought to have been real by an ancient civilization, Johnson replied. It was at that moment we heard Daniel scream from deep within the cave. That's Daniel, I screamed. We all rushed towards where we heard the scream, tripping and tumbling over rocks the entire way. We kept screaming things out like, "We're coming, Daniel," or "Don't worry, buddy." But something in my mind kept telling me it was too late for Daniel. And if we went down there, we would meet the same fate. But I couldn't leave Daniel down there, even if he was dead. He has been with me since the first day of SEAL training. He was my brother. We raced down the cave, sprinting as fast as we could, until eventually we turned a corner and... "Oh my God," Ricky whispered. We stood there in horror. At first I didn't exactly know what I was looking at, but then it dawned on me. It was Daniel's body. It was torn to shreds. It was almost unrecognizable, and if it weren't for his dog tag, I might not have been able to figure out it was him. We all stood there over what was left of his corpse, petrified with fear. I was about to say something until we heard a loud crash coming from across what I now realized was a massive dome-like room within the cave. We all turned to look to where we had heard the crash, and what we saw makes me regret even joining the military in the first place. That thing that was drawn on the walls of the cave. There it was looking at us. It looked even more hideous in person. It was about 40 feet tall, jet black save for dark blood-colored eyes. It had jagged teeth with 10 long squid-like tentacles protruding from its back. It had those black dragon-like wings and a lizard-like tail, just like the drawings. Its face. My God, its face. The red eyes and jagged teeth, the rotten skin, and the long black hair. I wanted to say it looked human, but this thing was far from human. It let out one raspy growl and the walls of the cave began to shake. Then it got even worse. People, thousands of people wearing clothing made out of bones and cloth with face and body paint all over them began closing in on us. I don't know where they came from, but there were at least 2,000 of them. We gotta get out of this hell, I yelled. Ricky and Johnson were still petrified with fear. Let's go, I yelled at both of them. All of a sudden the creature shrieked a disgusting shriek and one of its tentacles extended a tremendously long length and wrapped around Ricky. With one swift pull, Ricky went flying in the air and into the creature's mouth. I wanted to do something, but there was no time. I yelled at Johnson to follow me and we both began to run. I fired off a few rounds at the people chasing after us, and they fell to the ground, creating a small gap for me and Johnson to run through. I sprinted through the gap, nearly getting caught by one of the people. Once I was out of the gap, I checked to see if Johnson was behind me, and he was. We both raced up the cave, trying to remember where we had come from. The last thing either of us wanted was to get lost in the hellhole with that thing. We kept sprinting, desperately making our way through the caves until we saw the light from the entrance. I quickly glanced behind me and noticed that some of the people were still chasing after us. I grabbed a frag I had on me and tossed it at them, sending them all flying. The relief only lasted for a second though, when I heard a demonic screech coming from within the cave. At the moment, me and Johnson sprinted out of the cave, kept running. When we were about 300 yards away from the cave, I turned around to see if we were being followed. There it was, not following us, but standing at the entrance of the cave, looking right at us. We both stared at it for about 30 seconds. It let out one last deafening screech and then went back into the cave. Neither me or Johnson knew if it was going to come back out. But we weren't staying to find out. We resumed running, not stopping until we knew we were far away from that cave. When we finally stopped, we both found a place to rest and we just sat there not saying a word. About an hour passed before Johnson finally asked what time is it. I checked my mobile clock, 8:30 p.m. Exfil was in 30 minutes it. Do you remember where Exfil was? I asked Johnson. Yeah, when we were running, I somehow managed to keep track of where we were. Luckily for us, the helicopter is supposed to arrive 5 miles west of here, he replied. I sighed with relief and we began heading that way. When we got there, the helicopter was waiting for us. What took you all so long? We were just about to head off and leave here. And where are the other two? The pilot asked. I just looked at him with a blank expression on my face. He just nodded and began to take off. When we arrived back at the headquarters, me and Johnson were pulled into a room and sat down. 4 men in suits and the general that had briefed us before walked in. They had looks of pity on their faces and one of the suited men leaned in. He sighed. Here is $1 lakh each for both of you. Never speak of this again, please, he said. He slid the wads of cash to both of us from across the table, and they all filed out except for the general. The general looked at us with sad look on his face for a minute, and then informed us that our flights home would be tomorrow, and the option for an early retirement would be presented to us. I am now a 46-year-old man, still happily married to my lovely wife, Mary, and the proud father of beautiful 17-year-old named Jessica. I still keep in touch with Johnson and sometimes we get together at a bar or around a bonfire and just cry together. Cry about what we had witnessed and for the loss of our 2 brothers. I will forever hold hatred towards the United States military and the government. for willingly putting us in the situation they did, lying to us so we wouldn't back out of the operation and getting my two closest friends killed. When my wife asked what happened to Ricky and Daniel, I lied and said they were shot while in Afghanistan. When I wake up screaming at night from the nightmares, I tell her it was just nightmares from what happened in the Middle East. I could never tell her what actually happened or why I was actually diagnosed with severe PTSD. I even lied to the doctors at the VA, partially because I was informed by the government to never speak of what happened, but also because I would be deemed crazy if I ever told anyone. I couldn't keep up to myself any longer though. I had to get it off my chest. So for all of you out there, never become a Navy SEAL, never enlist in the military, and never, I mean never, journey to the Darien Gap in Panama.